Welcome to Mind Balance. So here in Hong Kong, we had actually started to loosen our COVID-19 restrictions. So we were able to group in up to groups of 50 people. We were allowed to, go back to all our favourite places, all our gyms, massage parlours, bars and restaurants were open again. But of course, because of the new cases, new restrictions have been put in place. So a lot of that has been rolled back. We're only allowed to be in groups of up to 4. And again, there's a lot of closures of places where people may interact in close contact. So because we were starting to potentially feel a sense of relief, a sense of, that COVID-19, the pandemic might be under control, and also that we're getting back to a routine, a kind of normality as we were used to before, having these restrictions back in place could really trigger a sense of anxiety, low mood, even depression, and really a sense of hopelessness and uncertainty. How long is this going to go on for? How much more of this can we take? And for many of us, our mental health might be taking a bit of a hit. So that's what I want to address today. So really looking at how can we manage these emotions around COVID-19, around the restrictions around COVID-19, and how can we best navigate the challenges ahead. So what are some of those feelings around COVID-19 and the fact that it seems to be going backwards and that there might be another wave coming? So quite typically, there'll be a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety around, of course, our health. We may feel a little bit trapped, even though most of us, see or understand or even agree with the restrictions that are going on. We may nonetheless feel trapped and confused. We're not quite sure what restrictions are in place, what can we do, what can't we do, and we might have health concerns. We might be worried that we could catch COVID-19, or some of our loved ones might catch COVID-19, and then worry about what will happen to them, and just from a medical and from a health perspective. But then, of course, we also have anxiety around the economy, around our financial future, perhaps the financial future of the country, maybe even considering if we're going to stay, if we're going to leave. And then just future uncertainty in general, because COVID, of course, is all over the world, not just here in Hong Kong. So really, where's the future of the globe going? If we did want to leave, where would we even go? And what's that going to mean in the grand scheme of things? So really what we're dealing with at the moment is change. Now, change is almost constant in 2020. Change is a general constant in life, right? We change from moment to moment. So the only consistency in life really is change. However, 2020 feels like there's one thing after the next, and we're constantly adapting to a new changing environment. Be that new information, be that new restrictions, and just a lot of things that are happening globally across the world in 2020 that are stimulating change. Now, change can be very stressful because as humans we like to keep things constant. It's great for our brains to have a routine and to create predictability around us so that we don't have to constantly respond to new input. Responding to change constantly is actually very tiring and fatiguing for us. So many of you might feel very fatigued at the moment at this stage in 2020. However, change can also be a chance, an opportunity for growth. And that's really what I want to be looking at today, especially in the light of, again, new COVID-19 restrictions. We thought we were going forward, and now, unfortunately, we've gone backward. So how can we make sense of those feelings that are coming up for us? Because even though from a cognitive perspective we may be thinking, well, okay, it is what it is, we're going to have to accept this, we're going to have to deal with it, but that doesn't mean that at an underlying level there isn't some emotion in the background that is really worthwhile addressing. So let's think of change in terms of a grieving process. And the reason for this is that change will always, whether it's forced upon us or whether we initiate it ourselves, mean a loss of something that was before. That could be a loss of routine, a loss of a connection and a person, or a loss of familiarity. But either way, there is always some sort of loss when we move forward, when we change, and when we grow. So let's look at the 5 stages of grief. Some of you may be familiar with these already, but let's apply them really to the situation right now, the changing COVID-19 restrictions, and just the change that we've been dealing with throughout 2020. So the first stage of grief is typically denial. This is the stage where we look for evidence that what we've heard isn't true. We might be Googling and looking up, well, what exactly are the restrictions going to be? And what do they mean for us? Will they really be implemented in the area that we live in? So this is the stage where we really try to kind of create a world in which this change isn't going to affect us. So stage 1, denial. Stage 2 is anger and frustration, and that comes with a real sense of unfairness. Oh, here we go again. We're again going to need to deal with this. This is so unfair. What have we done to deserve this? And that real knee-jerk reaction to, I don't want any more change. I'm not going to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. So then stage 3 is a bargaining stage. That's where we're trying to create a trade-off. So a sense of, if we do X, perhaps Y is going to happen. So if we do something to sort of trade off the impact of what those COVID-19 restrictions are going to have on us. And this is a real kind of trying to make sense of the new situation, but really still bargaining our way out of that change in some way. Stage 4 is depression. So that's a real dip in mood, a real kind of a loss of pleasure in previously enjoyed activities. We might lose motivation to do anything. And we may just be really sad and really defeated and hopeless and quite lost and confused at where we're at the moment. And then we've got the final stage, the stage of acceptance. So acceptance is when we've kind of accepted that the change is happening. We've started engaging with the change a little bit. So we might be looking at the COVID-19 restrictions and thinking, okay, well, this limits my options here, but what could I do instead? Starting to test, experiment a little bit. What other alternatives can I have? What can I do at the moment rather than what can I not do? And then moving forward, making decisions on how to handle the process, how to handle the restrictions, and then at the final stage, really accepting the change, really integrating these new restrictions into our daily lives until we don't really have to think about them. Now, often with COVID-19, things change so rapidly that final stage of acceptance isn't really achieved simply because we don't actually have time to go through all the stages and integrate the changes before new change is placed upon us. So that's something to keep in mind in this grieving process. The other thing to keep in mind is that this isn't a linear process, okay? You might be hopping around between the different stages. One day you may feel like you're on the path to acceptance, you're starting to engage with the change, and then the next day something might happen and you might go back into that anger, frustration state, or even sort of a flat, numb state of depression. And that's okay, right? So the grieving process happens as it happens, and you kind of just can stay aware of what stage you're in. And also observe what's happening to you. What meaning do these restrictions have to you at the moment? And how do you move through these stages? The one thing to, of course, keep an eye on is if you get stuck, especially in one of those anger or depression stages, then you may want to, reach out either for social support or even to a mental health professional if you feel you're really getting quite overwhelmed and you can't get out of that stage. A big challenge with COVID-19 and the restrictions that are put in place to safeguard our health is that these often interfere or even prevent our usual coping strategies. So for example, if you're the type to go to the gym after a stressful day and just sort of work that stress out, or if you like to go for dinner with friends and connect socially to decompress after a busy week, these are things that at the moment we may find we're either limited on or not at all able to do. So this can be quite frustrating, and it can also leave us a little bit up in the air, right? Because COVID-19 adds stress, so our stress levels might be going up, but actually resilience tools might be going down. So this change that's ongoing really invites us to find new resilience strategies and to build new coping techniques to be able to manage and navigate the challenges that we're currently facing. Now, of course, this is an effortful process. So if you're in a space right now where you say, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm tired, I'm unmotivated to do anything at all, then that's perfectly fine and honestly perfectly understandable. When you do have that time where you're ready to go, okay, I will be a bit more proactive, then I'd really invite you to become your proactive agent of change. Because as everything in the world currently is full of uncertainty and unpredictability, we will regain a huge amount of autonomy and a huge amount of a sense of control if we're able to take a proactive role in how we're going to navigate this change and how we're going to deal with everything going on around us. Now, there are 6 areas in life that really contribute to positive mental health and help us to maintain our well-being. So that's achievement, so work, career, it's social relationships, a sense of fun, so doing things that bring us intrinsic joy, looking after our mood and our self-care, looking after our physical health, and then also finding a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. Now, these 6 areas are important to our lives in general and are important to our mental health in general. But of course, at a moment like this, where there's a lot of pressure and strain on our mental health, they become even more essential for us. So let's talk through them. Let's start with work, achievement, career. And often we want to be productive, right? We've got very busy schedules, and COVID-19 has really impacted that globally. So what are some of the ways we can deal with these new restrictions that we've just received on how these affect our work? So we may, for example, be less productive than we expected ourselves to be. Now, in that sense, we do need to step back a little bit and just look at the greater context. It may be practice some acceptance that the tasks that we wanted to do and the targets that we wanted to meet this year may not be possible and may not be realistic. It's important to come away from that sense of we must be successful at all costs and we have to achieve against all odds, because realistically, in the current context that we're in, there are more challenges to our productivity and to our achievement. And that's something that needs to be taken into consideration when we evaluate our own success, and also by what measurement we evaluate our own success. Another thing is to set boundaries. That's if you're back to working from home in the current situation, setting boundaries between work and home life is really important. That even if your space is small, sometimes you just need to change a little something. Maybe you change the way the desk is set up, or you have a different corner that you don't usually use. Or you set boundaries with your family members in a certain way. But whatever you do, setting boundaries to have a workspace will train the brain to know that that's a space that it's meant to be productive in. And then the other space, the home space, is where we can go and play and have fun. Another thing that we would do good with setting is a routine, because as long as the world with COVID-19 remains awfully unpredictable, it can help our brains to be less anxious if on a day-to-day basis we have some level of predictability, some level of routine, that the brain knows what to anticipate next. Now, that's not always going to be a perfect system, but it can be helpful to structure our days and also our week in a way that we have a sense of security despite all the chaos that might be going on in a more global context. And then we can also use this time to buff up our skills, take a couple of courses, and that can really help us grow our confidence as well and remind us of how much we've learned and how far we've come. Because even in the last 6 months, most of us have had to have a quick crash course in technology and figure out how to run everything from home in a physically distant space to everybody else. So even in that time, we have learned a lot and certainly have become different people to to the people we used to be in, say, January. So those are some of the resilience strategies we can start building on in terms of the work and achievement area. Now, socially speaking, social distancing, of course, puts distance between us and our friends and our families, and that can be really frustrating, and it can make us feel very disconnected. Now, as humans, we are social animals, so we do need that interaction, that nurture, and that care for each other. So do connect and reach out to the people that are close to you and that you are close to. And I know a lot of people say, well, technology doesn't really replace having someone physically there. And that's true. But what it does allow is for us to share our vulnerability and to connect on a very human level. So really sharing your inner thoughts, sharing your anxiety and your stresses, and also allowing another person to share those back to you. That's how human bonds become very deep and very strong, right? When we're creating a safe space in which we can be vulnerable with each other. So I really can't emphasize enough how important shared vulnerability is in a time like this. And also reaching out to people that we haven't heard from in a while. Because sometimes people do need that social interaction, but they're not quite sure how to reach out or whether it's appropriate to reach out. So making the first step can also have something very empowering. And using empathy and compassion and validation to really try and understand, where someone else is at the moment, and see if there's ways of supporting that person. These are ways of putting ourselves into it, giving ourselves a sense of control, and also supporting someone else in their time of need can be very, very rewarding for each and every one of us. Looking at fun things, so really finding fun things that give us intrinsic joy are such an important part of life. As they say, it shouldn't be all work and no play, right? And now even more so, especially if suddenly we have a lot more time on our hands than we had before. One really valuable thing there is to make lists of things that you would do if you had time, so that when suddenly time opens up in front of you, you can go to that list and just point to something and go ahead with that. Another thing is learning new skills, learning new playful skills, doing puzzles. All these things really reward the brain. The brain is rewarded by novelty. So when we're learning something new or doing something new or figuring out a puzzle, the brain naturally rewards us and makes us feel good. And that's something that can be done, even if you're working from home or you have to be socially distanced from other people. There's a lot of how-to videos now on YouTube to keep us busy, and also lots of other courses being offered, some of them for free. Another thing that can be really helpful in these times is getting our creativity flowing. So whether that be painting or writing or sketching or music, whatever that might be, it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a matter of letting that creativity flow through us, because again, that's something that naturally rewards the brain and naturally rewards us. So creating something is a really valuable thing for our mental health. In terms of mood and self-care, a lot of that is around emotion regulation, but of course regulating our emotions also means engaging with them, acknowledging them, not simply dismissing them and hoping they'll go away. So if we can sit with our emotions and reflect on them, important things are things like, where are they in our body? What are the thoughts that are connected to these emotions? And how does the feeling change the more we focus on it? That's one way of observing our emotions. Another strategy can be to ground ourselves in the present, because if we're grounded in the here and now, we don't really have the brain space to think about the past and the future and worry about those. In order to ground ourselves, it's really important to bring ourselves into our bodies, either by checking in with sensations, see how our skin is feeling that day, how our muscles are feeling, or even looking around in the environment and using all our 5 senses. So we might be looking at different objects, really taking those objects in, using a sense of curiosity, like we really want to explore these objects and like we're seeing them for the first time. looking at colours and shapes and what does the texture look like, how does the light reflect on the object, those kind of things. And we can do that with hearing, we can do that with smell, with taste, and with tactile stimulation. So in terms of hearing, again, the same thing, really getting absorbed in the sound, seeing what the quality of the sound is, the intensity, the volume, things like that. Now you could do that while you're listening to your favorite music and just get really immersed and absorbed in it. And it calms the system down, because the moment we feel grounded in the moment, our anxiety reduces. So it's a really valuable grounding exercise, is to just bring ourselves into the moment. Another thing to do is to look at why, so look at our emotions, look at what's going on for us, but also if we're feeling demotivated to do something, just look at what's been triggering this. So really it's a good time for reflection and understanding what our triggers are, and that gives us a little bit more power to make changes, either to avoid those triggers or to manage them in a better way. So COVID-19 in a way gives us a great opportunity to do some self-reflection and some self-care and some self-focus that can be really, really useful for when things kind of go back into a more familiar routine, because we'll have gained knowledge on ourselves and gained new resilience strategies that we can also use then. In terms of health, it'd be really good to get your heart rate up once a day. And I know in Hong Kong, in particular, that can be a bit tricky at the moment. The gyms are closed, of course. The heat is up, so it's very hot to go outside and exercise, and then often many of us live in quite small living areas, so again it's difficult to find that space. If you can get creative, do. Again, creativity is important anyway, but also then hopefully you can find a way to exercise, get your heart rate up, which can also clear the mind, get some of that restlessness out, and is just healthy for us physically. Something else, if you can't exercise, or even in addition to it, is to practice some real self-nurturing and take advantage of the fact that restaurants and bars are closed, and really go and do a meal plan, or try out new recipes and cook something healthy and enjoyable for yourself. So around health, really trying to nurture the body as well as the mind. And then finally, purpose. Now, purpose is super, super important in general. And often what happens, and we see this in the so-called midlife crisis, is that people have prioritized career and building a family and building a life together. And then at the age of around 50, when the career's been going well and we've achieved a lot of what we've wanted to achieve, and the family, the kids are getting older, everything's quite settled, we suddenly feel like, but what was the purpose of all this? Was it worth it? What meaning does that give our lives? And what have we contributed? And so people go into a bit of a midlife crisis, sort of confronted with some existential questions as well. So purpose and meaning are really key to human life. So now during COVID-19 is also a good time to look at, well, am I fulfilling my purpose? Do I know what my purpose in life is? What gives my life meaning? And if we're not sure of that, it's a great time for reflection, maybe reevaluating whether our life is going into the direction that we want it to go, or whether there's some other changes we would like to make. So really it forces us to pause and shake up our world a little bit and see, what's going on for us and what we actually want from life. So really having a look at that meaning and purpose element is also super important. Now, looking at those 6 categories, the key here is not to kind of go, oh yeah, I'm really good on that, I'm really strong on that, and actually that, I'm a bit weak on that, so maybe I need to change something. What would be more important than that is to look at, if one of those categories we feel very fulfilled in, why do we feel fulfilled in that? What contributes to us having great resilience in that particular category? This can be useful to know, not just to help build that category even more and make ourselves even more resilient, if you so will, but also to see if any of those reasons could maybe be guided towards some of the other categories, and help us build some resilience in those that we are less strong on. And vice versa, also looking at, if I'm not particularly strong on my sense of purpose, for example, or my sense of achievement, then what could I do in the given circumstances at the moment to strengthen that area a little bit and to focus on that area a little bit? So really, a key element, as always, in any form of change is to start with reflection, awareness, and then slowly start implementing little changes here and there. And I can't emphasize enough being that proactive agent of change for yourself, really gaining that control and that autonomy to navigate the challenges of COVID-19 and all the restrictions that currently come with it. So I am including some resources for you, so you can look at those 6 different areas of your life and see what resilience strategies you can implement, what improvements you can make, how you can build those areas up to ensure better mental health and well-being, and also to ensure maintaining your mental health and well-being in the current changing times. So please do make use of those resources. You'll also see my contact details on the slide if you've got any questions, you want to explore something at a deeper level, or you just want to reach out for a bit of mental health support. Please do get in touch. And thanks for listening in today, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye.